Welcome to Inner Rhythm, a podcast about the creative process and following your inner voice. As always, we are broadcasting today from the historic home of artists Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, where in each episode we connect you with their legacy of artistic authenticity. I'm your host and the director of the PK House, Matthew Ward. On today's episode, we uncover the inner rhythm of recording artists Maxine and Dean Holiday. Together, Lina and Dean formed the eponymously named band Lina and Maxine. Following their 2022 UK tour, the duo settled in Montauk. As they perform at venues across the South Fork, defining and refining their individual and unified artistic voices, they're also working on a third EP. On today's episode, we discuss the dynamics of being life partners and collaborators. We talk about how Lina and Dean came together both in music and in marriage, and how their collaborative process has evolved together. We discuss the practicalities of being young artists striving to find and stay true to their voice, while also seeking success and stability in today's music industry. We also discuss the unique circumstances of pursuing these goals on the east end of Long Island. So we were talking a little bit, Lina, about your background, your training, your background in jazz bands, and you mentioned Billie Holiday, actually, maybe Pollock's favorite singer. Such a huge percentage of Pollock's records are Billie Holiday.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Super cool.
And you mentioned a really interesting point, which is differentiating between emulation and your authentic voice. And you feel that now, as both of you are working on this third EP for you, Lina, that you're getting really close to that authentic voice. The kind of thing you would sing when you wake up in the morning. Now, as a duo, as a collective, both Dean and Lina, you are the band Lina Maxine. How do each of you achieve your authentic voice when working together? Because we do have two voices, two creative minds here coming together. How does that process work for you?
Great question.
It's been changing a lot, which is part of the question, part of the answer to us finding more authenticity. I feel like when we first got into this project, I was very attached to getting things done in a certain way that I alone wanted. And Dean was very receptive to that. And he, because I had some kind of idea or a vision or something, and he sort of, made all of those dreams come to life. But I think as we started to come into both voices being heard as strong, I think there is beauty in collaboration. I think that there is true art being made at the cusp of both people with different ideas feeling strongly about something, but coming together and being able to allocate room for each of their individuality, but in the pursuit of the same goal. I think that's how art translates best to the viewers as well, because then the third person, who is the viewer or the listener in our case, is also able to ascribe their own meaning or their own understanding. So I've seen a lot of value in getting outside of my head and my approach of like, this needs to be this way or that way. I think there's limitations into putting yourself into narrow-minded vision, and there is always growth to be found on the outside of that.
Yeah. I think something that, in order to answer your question, I think to answer it very honestly, I'd have to say that I think music has a knack for, I can only speak for myself. And in my case, before coming here, I think I had fallen into a trap where the music I was writing and the music I was hoping to create one day was very much an emulation of stuff that I had grown up loving. Stuff that I believed perhaps would result in me creating something that touched people in the way I wanted it to. And I think that until I met Lina, I had not truly had the gumption to maybe face some harsher realities within myself, some realities that perhaps spoke to the fact that maybe I'd never really investigated where I was coming from, what I wanted to say, why I wanted to say the things I wanted to say. I feel like I was sort of just desperately trying to be a sort of knockoff Springsteen, you know, from the UK. So it was a bit of a messy formula. But I met Lina and it made me examine myself. We got to work on stuff quite quickly after meeting. And Lina has a massively capable mind at firing out, I've got this idea, I've got that idea, let's do it like this, and I fell into the role of technician. I fell into the role of, okay, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that. But after a while, I think what has happened is that through a mixture of where we are and how we are, I started to hear my own voice just a little. You know, I'm still at the beginning of this journey. But I feel like what we've been able to start creating is the first truly authentic work that my hands have ever created, at least, you know. I feel like everything up until this point, it's been all right. It's been good at times, but it hasn't been me or purely like a truly authentic work, you know? I feel like it's been me finding my feet. And now that we've started doing this, I feel like we're starting to create something that's a little more unique.
That must be a really exciting feeling.
It's super exciting, dude. Super. Stressful. Because it kind of like, it does come hand in hand with
New
a fun...
grounds.
Yeah, new grounds, a little existential crisis. You're like, oh, okay, oh my God, do I know who I am? What have I been doing my whole life, you know? But at the same time, it's deeply moving and super exciting because like when we're playing stuff of ours and people are singing it back to us, that's beautiful, you know? That means the world.
It sounds like a key ingredient of your relationship, your collaboration, is that you challenge one another. And we are here in the studio of Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, not only two of America's great abstract painters, also a married couple. And they supported and encouraged one another, but also challenged one another. Lee especially held Jackson responsible and, you know, was very intent on him achieving his potential and being productive. And so that sort of, and it was even described at different points as antagonism being an ingredient of their relationship.
Yeah.
But I think something in there, something about that was very key to this authentic exploration. It was after meeting Lee that Jackson went from, for example, emulating his mentor, Thomas Hart Benton, in these regionalist type paintings, and eventually achieving the kind of expression that happened here on this site. And so that brings us also to environment. You guys are working on your third EP and getting towards this feeling of authentic expression, and it's happening out here on the east end of Long Island. Do you think that the environment has anything to do with this? Is it incidental? Would this have happened anywhere? How does your location play into the process of making the music you're making right now?
It's a striking difference, for sure. We first met in London. That's where we started working on music and kind of getting to know each other. And it was obviously in the middle of the busiest cities of all time, which has a certain expectation for how, to carry yourself as a human, much more, like as an artist as well. And there's a lot of these things that you don't quite understand. And again, they're emulations. I think there's an urge to fit in some kind of way. And I think when you strip all of that back, that's where you end up being a little bit more removed in the countryside, where for the first year we've moved out here, we barely saw any people. We were just, like focusing on each other and our music and thinking like what's ahead,
Mm.
And I think that it largely is the catalyst to what we've been talking about, the authenticity, and also now coming into grips with meeting people who we truly feel like we connect with. We have a band out here. We have wonderful musicians in our band. We have Parker on guitar and bass, and we have Jason on percussion and drums. They have been here for a while as well, and we all come together for jam nights, and we find a lot of peace and a lot of purity in being almost in nature, being out to look out to the blue sky and to the water and to the grass. Obviously, that all is almost in a thorough kind of way is the catalyst for creation and inspiration. When you have less, you have more almost.
I would say that being here is very much the absolute catalyst that has sparked an enormous amount of change, both in my personal life and our personal life and our professional lives as well. Like, I think that there is something magical about the East End, and I think it goes a little beyond the fact that, okay, it's gorgeous and there's the ocean and it's natural and quiet and all the rest. That's lovely. But I think what really blew my mind when we first arrived here, and what became quite what ended up having quite an impact on my psyche and ultimately on the relationship I held with myself as an artist in my mind, was getting to speak with people like you or some of the musicians out here. This place is filled with people that love something very deeply. And I haven't seen, I love London very, very deeply. It's where I was born, where I spent my whole life. But I couldn't tell you the last time I met, that's an unfair statement, but it's certainly a lot rarer to meet someone in a city who lives for something, who loves it deeply. And I think that that's a byproduct of city life. I think you do tend to perhaps dilute yourself a little bit and start being a jack of all trades. It's to make ends meet or to have friends or whatever it is. Being here reminded me that the only way to be better than mediocre at something is to give yourself to it completely. And I couldn't have done that if we weren't here, because a lot of people led by example. I watched them exist and they reminded me. You know what I mean?
It sounds like you are really tapping into an ethos that was central to the legacy of this place, of an artist community where artists are focused on work, but also communing. There's this remoteness outside of the city, but it's not that kind of Thoreau solitude that you had mentioned, Lina, because there's other people there inspiring one another. Have there been any unique challenges to creating and performing on the East End?
Oh, yeah. Of course. We spend 24 hours a day together. Like, it's a massive challenge to curtail your ego and be like, okay, I need to be able to think about, for example, just a song as a overall product, as a thing that exists of its own accord, outside of my opinions of that section, that line, that word, that whatever. I think that working with someone who you love so closely on something that you love so deeply is in itself like the definition of chaos. Because there's so much that you want to say, but you don't want to say, but does it need to be said? And I think that the challenges have been not a lot of them, but they've been real, and they've been really beautiful challenges because they've shown ways for us to become way stronger as lovers and as musical partners. You know what I mean? It's really cool. Like, there's something magical about being here specifically. Also, sorry, I know I'm yabbering, but there are a lot of iconic people out here that do beautiful art, be that in music or in film, and that who do it with their partners. And I've never seen that either, you know? That's so inspiring and so beautiful.
Yeah, one of the first people that we met here was Joe D'Elia and PJ D'Elia, who are local musicians. Joe hosts Monday night jams at Talk in Montauk, where a lot of pro players, a lot of people who have history of performing across the country, or just exceptional players come out from 7 to 10, and they basically coordinate what they're going to perform or sing or play. And anybody from bass players to horn players to harmonica to singers, what have you, come out. And it's such a strong community. And also PJ, who is his wife, she is absolute life of the party. She's been the most supportive of us since the beginning. She was somebody who got us our first gig at Talk as well. So there is that sort of like, you guys, I want to be you when I grow up. And, you know, there's that unspoken communication in terms of like, we as couples have something that we both feel strongly about, and we legit uplift each other. Legit.
As a married couple who are also artistic collaborators, is that a dynamic that you try to balance and keep separate, or is that futile and they're going to be one and the same no matter what? How do you view it? Is there a line?
I honestly think that we are not, you know, we're not playing any character or anything. Like, what we are is who we are. And when we get out there, everybody knows that we are together, and we don't try to keep that separate. You know, that's about the only true thing that exists in our lives right now. You know, maybe it's not, I don't know. I feel like the social media and like the presence of and the role of musicians and artists is changing from, like, you know, 10 years ago, everybody's keeping it separate or secluded or something. I think we have to be true about where we're coming from and who we are, and our love is our truth.
Yeah, it's the fuel behind all of this. It would be an exercise in futility for us to attempt to perhaps sweep it under the carpet, present ourselves as anything else. But also, I feel like it would be a bit of a step backwards for us. Something that would begin. At least I'm sure you are too. I can't speak for you, but something that I've been really gleaning from those jams that you just mentioned, and PJ and Joe and Nancy Atlas and her husband, and there's a bunch of artists out here that are just, they're so sick, they're so cool. And I think something that I've been learning from them is that the more honestly yourself you are, the more beautiful anything you do is going to be. And it sounds incredibly obvious, but I certainly did not live by those words, you know, like I think that, you know, I think that it can be very easy to fall into the trap of trying to present yourself as this super cool, like, whatever. maybe it's cooler to not be all that cool. You know what I mean?
I suppose I was also wondering, work-life balance, is that something that you think of, or is work, since it's your passion,
Work is
does it
life.
not,
Yeah.
work is life?
Yeah.
What we do, I thank God every morning that we get to do what we do and call it work.
Mm.
Like we're not printing money, but we make enough to get by. And the fact that we make enough to get by playing music is like the biggest blessing in the world, If we weren't working on a record, I'd be playing my guitar anyway. So, yeah.
Artist John Little, he described one of the first interactions between Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner. He said, quote, "Lee was in charge of the Works Progress Administration. One evening, she invited me to her studio to meet and take a look at the work of a young painter who was also on the WPA by the name of Jackson Pollock. Little would go on to say that Krasner was very enthusiastic about Pollock and found his work to be exciting and beautiful. Shortly thereafter, both artists would be selected by mutual friend John Graham to show in his exhibition American and French paintings. Really important for both of them, as this show juxtaposed the work of American moderns like Pollock, Krasner, and de Kooning with more established European names like Picasso, de Chirico, Matisse. So that's how Pollock and Krasner met, very entwined with their art, their professions. They met each other as artists. The first thing that Lee admired about Pollock was his work. So she met him first as the artist. How did you guys meet?
You?
We met by total accident, mutual friends, going out to dinner. We were shooting a music video that day with my friend Rock Choi, who is a South Korean guitarist who was featured on one of the songs in the EP. And we were out and about, and I was trying desperately to prove to Rock Choi that I have friends, which at the time I couldn't say I had too many. So I invited some friends on a night out, and Dean was a friend of a friend, and we kind of met, and it was like one of those sparks, right away. And shortly after, I was going on tour, and we kind of just went together, and everybody was wondering how long we've known each other, because it felt like we've known each other for such a long time, but it's only been a month or something.
Yeah.
And since then, we've just been inseparable for
legit.
all this time.
Yeah. I kind of had to find a way to like insert myself into this tour that she was going on. I'm at this restaurant. I see this. I told you I can't see all that well, but at the time she had red hair, and I didn't know it was red, but it looked different to how regular hair looks, and I was just like, I was blown away. So I had to find a way to get myself onto this tour. So I was like, hey, if you want to film it, I'm good with a camera. So, but can't you see? And can you not see? I'm like, no, I don't need to see. I can film anyway. It's good. And yeah, we made a film out of that thing, out of the tour. It was such a good film. And then, yeah, she told me she was going to New York, and I was like, okay, I'm going to New York too. I guess I'll see you there, And yeah.
So you started collaborating pretty early on.
Oh, dude, straight away. From day one, all we've ever known as a couple is building together.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, one of the first memories of us, like, I'm pretty sure one of our first unspoken dates was basically just editing the footage from the tour.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Because he had this idea of making it into a little video about like performances and behind the scenes, and we basically just hung out for 14, 16, 18 hours straight, like editing, selecting footage. And I think that's how we formulated, that's how we got to understand how we work, like what we aspire to, because he had a lot of ideas and a lot of things that he's really good at. He has a lot of creative ideas and a lot of, even though there's differences in vision, I feel like he has such a special eye. Like he sees things that not many people can see and recognize, and angles and lighting and all of those things that I was really admiring and learning from a lot. And I just wanted to be more, I wanted to understand more of how he processed it. It was so alien to me, and nothing that I could ever read about or anything could help me understand. So I was just like, how do you see this, or how do you process that, and how do you in fact like approach some projects? And he has a style. That's what I love most about Dean. I think he, as much as he's coming about into his authentic self, I think he's always been that way since, because he's had his unique challenges and his unique experiences. I think that's something that I learned from a lot.
Appreciate that.
Dean, we spoke a little bit earlier about your challenges with your visual challenges. Has that affect the way that you approach music? Because you don't, as a producer, you're not just dealing with the sonic element of music. And you guys are the total package. You're producing your own music videos. How has your unique situation either been a challenge at points, or it sounds like from Lina, it's been an advantage in some ways?
I would say it's very much a case of both, So for context, I'm legally blind. So if you put it in numbers, about 1 or 2%, a little less than 1% really, of like effective vision, percentage being compared to say 20/20 vision. So no color and all that stuff. But anyway, I see about that far in front of me, and it has made certain things, especially when I was learning how to do stuff. Let's just say there was definitely a lot of challenges, but I think that my eye condition kind of from an early age set me on the path of music, because it was the only thing that I didn't need to bring special equipment with me in order to do. You know, if I was going to maths class or chemistry or whatever, I had to bring a huge like camera and computer and like zoom in on the blackboard or the whiteboard and like have a note taker beside me who was writing notes down for me because I couldn't do it, you know. And all my papers were this big, and it was all just a massive, I felt like such a outsider, you know. Everyone else in the class was totally chilling, you know, and there's me with my like, you know, small CVS worth of gear to try and do this class. But then we go to music, and I didn't need to bring anything, and I could pick up any instrument and just hit it or pluck it or bow it, and it worked, you know. It made sense to me because it was something I didn't need to see. And from then it was quite obvious, like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is the only thing I'm really good at. And I think I was probably a better musician technically in my late teens than I am now, but I got pretty good, and then I lost it a bit. But I think that I'm really grateful to have this condition. Listen, I've made an absolute fool of myself 100 times. Like my first professional photo gigs, I delivered photos where people's skin was green because I couldn't tell. I thought I'd done a really good job airbrushing. I had been painting in green, so it was not good. But you learn from the mistakes. You learn how to work around. There's a lot of things, a lot of technical duties in music and in video that do require a lot of visual prowess. and I've had to find workarounds for them, ways I can do that without having to see it. But if I had a magic wand and I could see normally, I don't think I would wave it. I really like the routes that my condition has forced me to take.
Yeah. And Lina, a moment ago, you have a background in art history, and you're a great appreciator of art. And we were talking a little bit about how you have been passing that along to Dean. And you were telling a fascinating story about seeing a Rothko painting in Washington, D.C. Could you go into that story a little bit? Because I thought it was great.
Yes. Oh, well, we went to Washington, D.C. to just sightsee and have a little trip around. And we went to the National Gallery, and on the top of that gallery, I think on the third floor or something, there is a big Rothko exhibition. And I think Dean has a different way of perceiving the visual world, obviously, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of how certain visual objects or artworks can make us feel, even if you strip away the pigment and you strip away other, historical context or something like that. We played this game when we were just walking around and standing in front of these huge canvases, and I was asking him, how do you feel about it, or what does it make you think of? And the language that he's used has totally, resonated with me, and how, because of the way that I understood our work. Because with Rothko, for example, sometimes you'd have something that's a little bit more saturated and darker on the top and lighter on the bottom, and that obviously causes a certain emotion. And from my understanding, that's is the intended purpose of that juxtaposition and causing that reaction. So I think there's something interesting to be said about that goal being achieved despite the perception of pigment, because we've agreed, and I felt like the words that you've used were actually a lot more poignant than to me just reacting to red and green. Yes, those are opposing colors, because I know it's complementary colors, and they're creating certain tension, but there's details in how you perceived the density, or the light versus dark that has made us agree in how we felt about those works.
Yeah, it's been so cool to get to experience visual art with the support of someone who's willing to put the time and effort into watching me sniff it, and be like, actually that is there because of that, or these brush strokes in this direction, it's really, really been awesome for me. I'm really grateful for that.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, another aspect of your creativity is the written word, and your songs have beautiful songwriting. Is that something that you're both involved in? Is one of you the songwriter primarily? How does that work?
The songs on the first EP, they were very much done in tandem. They were sort of, I had a line, he had a line, and we kind of just put them together. And it's great, and we are so grateful that they make sense to some people, which is wonderful. But I think going forward, we're focusing a lot more on developing sort of, there's some songs that Dean has written, some songs that I have written, and there's some songs that we have absolutely said, well, that song we have the idea, or we have an overarching theme, and we're gonna set aside time so we can both get in the room and write it word by word together, because I think that's where we are able to test that almost third voice, which is the combination of the both of us.
Yeah. It's been really nice to write without the pretense of feeling like I need to present myself a certain way, or that Lina needs to present herself a certain way. I think that, again, that is something of a liberation that comes with being in the type of community that we're in. The type of community that if you go to any given restaurant or whatever, where they got some music going on, some artists, that you will see a sea of people of all walks of life that have no pretense about them. And I think that was a big blessing in allowing at least my brain to loosen up a little bit and maybe not fall back on this desperate desire to be perceived as a good and thought-provoking songwriter, and instead just say the stuff that was making, like, was really resounding within me. So I think that the environment does, in a lot of ways, facilitate a little bit deeper self-inspection and production of stuff that I definitely wouldn't have been able to write back in London or whatever. You know what I mean?
Lina, you used a phrase that I love and I think is very interesting, the third voice. Can you think of any moments, whether it's a specific line in a song or a specific song in general, or a moment in your studio where that voice has come out? Do you have a good example of when that voice has been its clearest?
I think just now, honestly, I think it's most obvious when we're playing live, because there's certain there's the simultaneous and intertwining of both of our voices because Dean is very expressive and he's very responsive to me. He's very good at like keeping, the timing, but also beautifying, or like sometimes I would sing something differently and he would reflect that in the guitar riff or the piano riff that he's using. So there is that conversation. So I think live, depending on obviously the context and depending on even in a band with other people, I think you and I are always a united force. In the way that we adapt our songs to live performances.
I agree. I think anytime we're playing, there's usually a moment or two in each show where the third voice, the Holy Ghost fills the room, I would say that last Thursday when we was at Green Room, I would say there was a fair few moments where there was some magic in the air. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And when we were at the Green Room, we spoke briefly about subject matter. And you alluded to the fact that you're kind of at a point now where a lot of, or some of your songwriting refers to your lives before you met. But now, as more time goes on, your reference material will reference your lives after meeting and who you are together. What has that been like?
I think, like drawing upon being here and being authentic and playing to the audiences here, I think music has the power to captivate because of its relatability, because it's not made in a time capsule or an isolated vacuum. It's made in a certain place at a certain time, especially given the unique time that we're at now, where I've definitely come out the other end of being just a TikTok or Instagram musician, and I'm putting much more emphasis on live because we've discovered that third voice and that ability of the live performances to come across more real and for the songs to be meaningful to somebody beyond the two of us. Yeah. So
no, there's one thing I noticed in that. I think that songwriting, let's say for example a year ago, I think we were playing it very safe in that, maybe not very, but pretty safe, in that there are certain areas of songwriting, there are certain subject matters, certain like themes that are pretty like common, you know, or that are like pretty universally relatable. And if you are in the ballpark of one of those, you can feel pretty comfortable. And it's good. But spending like the time that we've invested into not just our craft, but each other as well, has, at least for me personally, given me a lot more self-confidence. And some of the tunes that I'm working on right now are about stuff that I wanted to write about when I was like 15, but I never, ever had anywhere near like either the self-awareness or the self-confidence to do right, you know? And I feel like whilst I'm maybe not completely there yet, I think we're definitely on the road to being there. So that would be a big difference. You know, the subject matter goes out of this like vague, like
vacuum.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And it's situated in the real place where
legit, yeah.
people can understand why a certain thing is being sung in a certain way. And yeah.
Legit.
Of the songs that you're working on right now, and I know that, you know, a lot of them haven't been released, but what is your favorite?
I have one that I've been sitting on that Paul has played around with a few times, and like, holy macaroni, because I like, you know, I wrote a little tidbit, and I sang it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds all right. But then she comes along and sings, I'm like, oh, wow. It's just a song I started to write a few months back about not really knowing where to call your home or whom to look at as your people. I have mixed heritage. I grew up in London, but my family are not English, and I grew up with very mixed cultures. And as a result of that, I felt like I had to play a lot of character in order to fit in. And I feel like that was something that was really not cool to ever acknowledge. But I started writing this tune a while back, and it's been very cathartic to finally acknowledge that, you know, I've always felt a little bit outside of at least British society. And here, surprisingly, a lot less. Like, here has been really very, very, very welcoming. It is a bit of a mixed bag out here of peoples from all around the country, though, so that's probably why. But yeah, that would be my one.
Very excited about that song.
That's a tune, yeah. It's a tune. It's called Nowhere Boy. Obviously, that's a big ripoff, but it's a working title. And yeah, I'm really stoked to see where that one goes. What about you? What
I'm
saying?
excited.
Yeah, legit, right? It's fun.
Okay, so that's an interesting example of Lina. Earlier you mentioned that Dean does sing, although I have not heard this yet. With a song like that, will you change it in a way that it can be sung by Lina and that becomes your story? Would you sing it exactly as it's written as Nowhere Boy, or will Dean, you come in and sing this one?
I think it's a really great question that I don't know the answer to.
In terms of the lyric?
Who will sing it?
Lina will sing it. But I might back her up.
Yes, I think that's the song that we're holding off on recording until we're ready to in my mind, it's definitely us both singing
It might
on
be.
it.
It might be.
Maybe even a little duet of some
yeah,
kind.
it
Maybe
could
even
be
like a
cool.
verse by Dean and a verse by me. When
could
the
be
time is
cool.
right, I think the reason we are so grateful and for opportunities like this, it's a lot of, you know, making sense of what we're doing as well as a result of, you know, talking to you and meeting people out here. There's a lot of things. I'm used to a lot of things happening in your head, and you just kind of roll with the punches and you see where you end up. But in order to work something through, you this is the place to do that, and I think we're not pushing for it to be recorded tomorrow like we
Right.
would have maybe a year and a half ago.
Oh, for sure. Dude.
Because we have the means to do it, we have the equipment, we
Yeah.
have the skill, and we have the readiness to do it. But some of these songs feel like they need a little bit more
Growing period.
growth
Yeah,
and a little
yeah.
bit more time,
Legit.
just time, because we've really took a lot upon ourselves from the moment we met to go into film and to produce our EP and to start playing and all of that. And sometimes it's good to just slow down a little bit
Yeah.
in order to get to the bottom of what
Yeah.
it is that you're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
And now you have that space and that
Yes.
time to give those songs. what they need.
Absolutely. And this place is such a blessing because on a given Wednesday, you know, if we're not playing, then there's really nothing else to do apart from work on your tunes, you know, which is like
Yes.
kind of sick. It's really good. It's really good.
So in a song like that,
Yeah.
Dean, it's very personal for you. It gets at the heart of something essential about who you are, how you grew up,
Yeah.
what led you to being the man you are now. Introspection is inherent in songwriting. As a couple, that seems kind of like a beautiful thing, that as collaborators, you must be vulnerable with each other to this extent all the time. Have you found that? And like
That's
you
such a
mentioned,
great question. dude.
you've always been collaborators, so I guess you don't know what it would be like without, but you understand each other
Yeah.
through this collaboration.
It's so insightful of you. That it's so insightful, and you're so right. Oh my God, I was so stressed to show her that tune because, like, already it's the most vulnerable I'd ever been with myself. You know, I'd never even acknowledged like any of this stuff to myself. You know, so you know, your lady walks in and you don't want to be like, oh, you know, I was bullied all through my childhood and I was so tough, you know. You want to be like cool, but cool doesn't write decent tunes, you know. Well, I mean, suppose cool does in some cases, but not in my case apparently. So yeah, being vulnerable in front of your partner all the time, and also being accountable as well. That's another really big one. Is like if it's something super mundane, like we're editing a music video, or we're mixing a song, say, and she goes, say Lina's got something to do that day, and I say, oh, all right, I'll have this section of the edit done by the time you get back, and maybe the temptation is to like go watch some YouTube and chill out a bit and not do it. You are constantly accountable and constantly in need to be vulnerable. And it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me because it has forced me to create art as an artist would, not so much as someone who wants to be seen as an artist would. You know what I mean? That's at least my side of it, you know?
And Lina, how do you feel singing a song like that? Kind of being entrusted with that story?
I feel like that's the moment I've been waiting for. I'm not, Dean is a much better songwriter than I am.
That's not true at all.
That's true.
No.
I think he is in terms of metaphor, and I'm learning a lot from him. So maybe, I don't know, like one day, but I feel that my place right now is to intone as the strength that I'm coming upon as the most true to myself, and maybe like, and songwriting will pick up along the way, and it has been, but I am really excited to be able to just put it through my soul and in a musical way, and stay true to like the lyrics in my understanding of it, while also staying true to his intent in terms of the nature of the lyrics.
Yeah, legit.
After you release this EP that you're working on and that you're putting so much time and attention and care into, it's out there in the world in the days, weeks, month, and year following. What do you hope that looks like?
Oh, it's a great one.
With the EP? Or
just your life after that release, in terms of maybe what's coming next.
Yeah.
Do you think in those terms? Do you plan ahead to that extent? Or are you just open to whatever happens?
I'm hoping we continue doing what we do.
Yeah.
Get better at it. Get more people on board with our vision.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think we always joke about ultimately maybe 25, 30, 35 years from now, we want to have a jazz club, which will be maybe a little spot to still sing and meet friends and continue being a little more lighthearted while also carrying that seriousness of staying true to like what we know we love into, eventually having a little studio where we can both just do what we do.
What we do.
Yeah, I guess that's the dream.
Yeah. I think like for me, what would specifically in, let's say, the month after the release of, let's say, an EP, like I feel like it's very tempting to think about things like numbers. And this is a trap I lived in for a long time. And I think most musicians do. Personally, I've got to the point now where I feel so lucky to be making music with the person I love that, like, honestly, what I would want the most, and really it's kind of the only thing, is once the hype of putting something out dies, which it always does, I really hope that the pride of what we created would really shine on still. And I feel like that's something that I've only started to acknowledge as a possibility recently. Because, before Lina, I think I lived very much by the idea of, okay, you put out a song, you're going to be super stoked on it for like a couple of months. And then you're going to start picking it apart and realizing how trash it is and how terrible it is and all the rest of it. That seems to be the way with music. But I think that since I started contemplating the possibility of writing something truly from the heart, I'm really excited to feel proud of something we've made. Really, really proud.
And to see it as a stepping stone, not like an end
goal.
Oh,
it's not it's
like
not
something that
the
defines
Everest.
us.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of things in our lives. Like, I don't know, my first EP definitely doesn't define me, and our second EP doesn't define us anymore. But like, are we going to spend time dwelling on that, saying like, please, like, let's take all of that down? I think no. And that's the testament to we now have we have our eyes set on what's next, and hopefully after that we'll know what that next thing is and the next thing is, and that's kind of the goal.
It sounds like you've embraced the reality of process.
Yeah.
It's a really great way of putting it. Really great way of putting it. Yeah. Very much so.
If you were going to describe to a new listener, Lina Maxine, or if you were going to describe Lina Maxine to yourselves, how would you describe your band?
You first.
Music that you can feel how you need to feel to. It's not necessarily going to try and evoke certain emotions out of you. I think what we're aiming for is to give the listener something that allows it to do what the listener needs it to do for them. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at, for example, that tune we just sang in here, Let Me, we put that record out last summer or so, maybe a year ago, give or take. Year ago? tune or so. Record's good. It's all right. It's decent, but the way we're playing it now is a lot more beautiful, in my opinion. A lot more, because I feel like Lina has come into. First of all, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Which the voice is out of the world, out of this world. It's bonkers. So there's that. That's working in our favor. But I feel like the way we've started to deliver these tunes, it's a little less intense and a little more artistic, a little more sensitive. And hence my idealization of the idea that maybe we could be what people needed us to be at the moment, just by doing what we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sick.
Yeah, that's well said.
Thank you.
I never know how to describe it. Like, I think I overthink it, and I'm being a little self-critical of, I know that when I sing it live now, I feel more of a connection, and I connect with people in the room, and I see who's responding to a song, like be it Cherry about falling in love for the first time. And I usually preface that song with, it's a falling in love at first sight. And like, I'm sure you know what that's all about, because I do. And I feel like there's people there who, the other night at the Bird on the Roof, there was a couple dancing to it. Like,
yeah, that was cute.
And I was singing that for them, like for their Saturday night.
Yeah, that's true.
Perhaps their story. And as we continue being here, and I hope we sing about more of those stories. And I hope that what ends up describing our music when it's more shaped up.
Absolutely.
So today, you guys got the chance and provided us the wonderful experience of performing in this space. Tell me a little bit about what that felt like, and also why spaces like this, institutions like this, which we are so fortunate to have so many of on the East End, uniquely fortunate to have the nonprofits and the art centers that we have out here. As artists yourselves, why do you feel that it's important that we do have these spaces?
Well, shall I? Yeah?
Good.
First, in terms of being here, I personally have not experienced anything like this before. It quite blows my... First of all, there's something incredibly grounding about being able to step into a home that was lived in by great artists and see that home in the state that it was when they were there. This is in a world where... Okay, that sounds dramatic, but in a world where things are changing every couple of seconds, and where we've started to normalize mind-blowing innovation on a pretty quick level, there is something really, really powerful about stepping into a historic place and seeing it having been kept true to the spec of the great minds that inhabited it. That in itself is like, wow. But furthermore, for us to be able to bring our diet version of art to this historic space where, I mean, some of the greatest works have been created. It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's also massively inspiring and very humbling, because we get to play on, in venues, or sometimes in a nice, whatever setting, some of the festivals in the summer or whatever. But to be somewhere here, that's to be in the presence of not only greatness, but inspiration and history. Places like this matter because they remind us what what it's all for, in that we create to express ourselves, and there's very little that could be more expressive than the floor of that room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's inspiring to an order of magnitude that I struggle to put it into words. And I'm like relatively new to the art world as well. So like I can only imagine what it would be like for someone who's, you know, like you know.
There's something really raw about seeing the paint on the floor, and there's already something super unhinged in a very positive way and artistic about Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner in the way of their creation, but about why they were pioneering that boundless medium of art that was so mind-blowing and different at the time. So you can see that from, you know, these are the panels that they carry the canvases on, and they're unintentionally painted from the drips from the canvases, but they are works of art in itself. I think there is so much about seeing that opposes the digital world and how it's curated and polished and edited and all of that, that being here is quite transformational for the mind. It activates like the brain chemistry that sometimes you don't even use like on the daily basis of just looking at the screens. So I think to be able to visit spaces like this is mind opening. And I think to bring more art into a space that inspires that raw humanity is like creating more artists that in some ways carry that legacy, you know, because they get inspired by the context and by the visual cues. And and that's something beautiful, because if you don't have that, you have AI generated art, which is nevertheless beautiful, but it's just a little bit different. It's terrifying. It's not human in the same way. So in the way, this is a temple for those nuances that make art evocative, and regardless of pigment and regardless of technique, well, because of technique and because of psychology.
Just to add to that, I think something that is very moving about being here specifically is that I think to see the works of the artist in a very formal establishment, in a museum, gallery, that's an experience. It's a beautiful experience, and nothing can be taken away from that. But it's a very formal experience. It's an experience that happens between one individual and a team of people who have put that experience together and put that painting there with that lighting for you to enjoy, for you to witness in that context. And it's powerful, it's beautiful, but it's one side of the story. To be in the home and the mind. We were in Lee's bedroom earlier. That's insane. That's so cool, you know? We got to see their record collection, their dining table, their plants. That's like, it gives you not only an insight into their minds, but speaking for myself, it makes me feel a little bit more capable as an artist. You know? I don't know how, I don't know why, but it does.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you will take away from this space, from this experience, that you might implement into your own process, into your own practice?
Oh, that's actually decent. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. First thing that came to mind was those spider plants, that Lee's spider plants, and then you have those seedlings, right, from the plants that she used to have, and now they are alive and well in the house. I think there is the takeaway is that we one day may no longer be here anymore, but things that we love and cherish will be, and there is there's beauty in that. There's meaning in caring for something and someone and in art that lives on. And I think that's a big takeaway, and I probably need to think about more about that. But
legit. I think for me, something that I will definitely take away from here, and I really look forward to coming back here, actually, because I feel like the place, the scenery, the rock formation out there's something quite magical about simply being here. It's quite good for my head, it seems. But something that I'll really take away is, I know that Jackson Pollock is synonymous with paint splatters on the floor. That's part of the brand. But to a layman like me, that's the extent of my knowledge. But seeing an artist's studio where 60 years later, there are a team of people who are responsible for looking after those paint splatters, has taught me that one thing I really need to let go of as an artist is this idea that I must do things in this strict and regimented way that I've grown accustomed to. That I must prepare my songs with a strict verse pre-chorus, bridge, chorus, end, structure and rhyming and syllables, and everything has to be inch perfect. Except there's a difference between hearing about a great artist who put loads of paint on the floor and seeing all that paint on the floor and seeing what that would look like in a mindset and the freedom that entails, the caution to the wind, and I am here to create, and what happens to the floor is a byproduct of that. That's inspiring as anything to me.
But also in art.
And in itself,
art
a work
itself.
of art in itself,
Yeah.
Yeah, legit. I feel like there's a lot to be learned from just letting oneself have the freedom to create without the fear of maybe breaking. I know it sounds so contrived, but there is meaning there. It's not purely cheesy. Without the fear of maybe breaking a few elements of the right way to do things. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Everything after Pizza Burger was beautiful. Really.